Welcome to another episode of They Might Be Gems. Episode 4, I believe, is what we're on this one. And trust me, this one's going to be one of the most controversial or most difficult ones for me to do because there's a game in here that is very, very triggering, and it's a very dark game that I think is going to be difficult for me to talk about. Maybe one of my most difficult videos I've had to make. But that's not what we're going to start off with because, for one, I want to reduce my chances of being demonetized as much as I can, and also, I'd rather start off talking about a happier, funner game. And so let's talk about this game called Yosei Wars. I believe it's called Yosei. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce it. I do have to thank the publishers for a review copy of this game. Yosei Wars is a retro-inspired 2D platformer. It really gave me like major Bubble Bobble vibes. And in this game, you take on the role of Hanoka, a brave little fairy who's on the mission to save captured tooth fairies from the clutches of evil junk food. And while this sounds like some downloadable game you could get with a purchase of a child's toothbrush, it is definitely not like shovelware or something. There is quite a bit put into the game, and something that I think helps it stand out is that this game does have bosses, and that's a really cool little add-on, and I'll get back to that here in a second. But another thing that I really appreciate about this game, aside from some really nice pixel art and some incredibly cool music, is the fact that this is not a rage quit style game where when you die you have to start all the way back at the beginning and you have to redo everything. No, when you die and go through all of your lives, you can just continue from where you left off at. And for me, that's really important with these type of games because, well, for one, I'm not very good at them, and two, I feel like these are the type of games that I like to play in between stuff, or, well, I only have like 10 or 15 minutes, and so to be able to continue from my last checkpoint, or, well, the point where I couldn't go any further, and to just retry some of the difficult levels, especially bosses, I think that's a really cool aspect of the game, because many of these retro style games I don't really get into because it feels like they don't want you to beat the games. Not saying I want something that's super easy, I'm just saying back in the day, a lot of the arcade machines were meant to just eat your quarters, so they would just make them incredibly difficult, and that's kind of how a lot of the retro inspired games feel now. But this is definitely not that. By giving you the opportunity to just continue from where you died seems to really be something that at least encourages me to continue playing it. And I might be overemphasizing that, but trust me, the last like 4 retro inspired games I played, they were incredibly punishing, and it really just made me stop playing them. The one thing though that I will say was an issue for me with this game is the fact that they don't really tell you how to defeat the bosses, especially the first one. I was stuck attached for a very long time. I had to actually watch a walkthrough to figure out what I was even supposed to do. But outside of that, it's a really fun game, and for only $4.99, I think it's a good pickup to just have something as a palate cleanser, or something in between bigger RPGs, or when you need a break from some of those long, arduous games. It's nice to have something like that to play. Okay, so for the next game I want to talk about, again, this is a trigger warning. There's a lot into this game that I really have to talk about to an extent, and then there's some of my opinions that is probably not going to be very popular, but I also kind of want to talk about that as well, just because I do want to address the narrative around this game and what some people had to say about it and my thoughts on it as well. So this is a game called Psychopathy Assessment, and I picked it up for the PS5. Well, actually a review copy was sent to me, so I have to thank the publishers for that one. But anyway, this is a game that takes 90s analog horror, PS1 style graphics, puts them in a blender, and sets the environment by giving you questions. At the very beginning of the game, you're actually given an assessment, a psychopathy assessment actually, to, see if you're a psycho or not. And depending on your answers will depend the environment in which this game actually takes place in a way, with different effects and things like that added. But the core gameplay is really sort of a psychopath simulator, as you play a character who has captured somebody who has done something wrong and then tortures them, and some other stuff happens, and there's a giant twist at the end, but I'm not really trying to give too much of the game away, and honestly, it's a really short game, so I don't want to give too much of it away. It's really easy to do. I almost did already, and it's really difficult not to, considering that one of the main things about the game is just this really interactive, disturbing part of the game that you can skip, and in fact I did skip. I really don't know the true ins and outs of it, but I've read enough to see that in the part of this game you are actually torturing a woman who is bound and is helpless. This is the crux of the game though. There's a very important role that this whole thing plays, and so does she. And of course, this is where a lot of the pushback and backlash that this game has received stems from, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to actually talk about the actual game first, and a couple of things that really bothered me about the game as a game, not to end the disturbing aspect of it, but actually as the game. So I told you about the assessment, the questionnaire they ask you at the beginning, where they determine, like, are you a psychopath? Anyway, I never really noticed that this makes much of a difference in the actual game. Like, just slight little things can change, but nothing major, and you would expect that to have a much bigger impact, considering the whole game is called Psychopathy Assessment, and you were taking that assessment. I really felt like that would have a much bigger impact, and it just doesn't. But the other thing that really got on my nerves, and in fact ended up taking all of my attention through most of the game, is the fact that when you're in the house and you're walking around, the carpets feel like they're moving. Like, it looks like they're moving. I don't know if this was like bad coding or if they purposely did this, but regardless, it made me so nauseous. Like, just trying to get through the game, I was more focused on not puking and feeling dizzy than I was worried about anything else that happens in the game. I don't know if they did this on purpose. If they didn't, they really need to fix it, and if they did, they need to have an option where you can turn that off, because it's really jarring. In fact, my experience when I finished the game was both ill and kind of disturbed. I really didn't feel like I could recommend this game, considering that most of the game, like I said, I felt kind of dizzy, and by the end I felt kind of grossed out and creeped out, and not in a good way at all. So I really wanted to gauge how the public had interpreted this game, and so I went to the Steam page, where I was even more disturbed and confused, as I saw a number of people who also felt the same way I did, where they weren't sure if it was a good game or not because of how creepy all of it is, but also because some of the technical issues as well. But what really stood out to me was the comments from the female reviewers who had put in that this is the standard typical male fantasy, and that was an issue for me, because while I do agree that I think men are just kind of lost right now and they don't know what it is to be a man, and what seems to pass as masculine these days is worrying about how shapely your muscles are, and then getting in a room with your friends and crying about how you're a victim of everything while speaking for 4 hours and getting paid millions of dollars. Yeah, to me, not much of a man. I would argue the dude who works all day driving a forklift and then comes home and plays fairy princess with his daughter is a man. And I do think we're confused on that aspect, but I do not think that men feel this way, at least in general. Like, the majority of men do not fantasize this way. If anything, I would say the mass majority of men fantasize about being a hero and saving a woman from being injured, or a child from being injured, or whatever, you know, just that typical hero role. So to say that this is a typical male fantasy played out through a simulator is really dark, and I really felt awful for the women who commented like this, because yeah, maybe they did it just to grab attention or something, but honestly, I think a number of them actually believe that, and that's a really messed up society where one group thinks another group fantasizes about hurting them in such a brutal manner. And to make something clear, I am not calling these women delusional. No, there is so much out there, especially online, that bleeds this sort of toxicity, and yes, most of it is because it's from behind a keyboard, and most of society knows that anything said online is kind of not real, but it's also the only reality that most of us are in right now. So it's a very complicated situation of, is this the true you, or is this just you saying something to get attention? Most of the time, it's the latter. But I really do think that men in general also have an issue about knowing who to look up to. Where is the masculinity? And I hope that it turns away from people like Andrew Tate and more into people like dads, people who know how to be actual men that know that you need to be the shield for the minority, the shield for the one who's bullied and oppressed. That's what you're supposed to be as a man. Men that know that they will never be taller as they are when they kneel down to help a child. Men that know that societies will only thrive when they plant trees they will never see fully grow. And I don't know, they're just my thoughts on all that. I know that went off the rails a little bit, but I felt like I needed to put that out there. Maybe just from being disturbed and grossed out by the game, or from all of the really concerning comments that I saw. Regardless of any of that, I personally would not recommend this game. It is only $7.99. Even just from a game perspective, it is about 30 minutes long, and there's a lot of issues with it. Now, it is an interesting idea, and if you're into just like very weird indie games that still have the right to exist, by the way, I'm gonna get on that on another video, but it might be interesting for you to check out, but don't expect an actual like game experience out of it. I don't know. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are on all that down below. Hopefully I didn't offend anybody by going off on my diatribe, but let me know what your thoughts are down below. I love each and every one of you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.